Hey everyone, welcome to South Africa, where stunning landscapes and vibrant cultures blend into a tapestry of breathtaking diversity. But wait, what's this? Oh no, it's slip and crash, and there it goes, shattered into pieces. But hey, don't act so surprised. South Africa has always been a paradox, a land of immense potential, but also one of the most broken economies on earth. Broken? What do you mean by broken, you ask? Well, before anyone rushes to the comments, let me clarify. By broken, I mean that South Africa has the highest statistical inequality of any country on earth. According to the Gini coefficient, the richest 10% of South Africans own around 80 to 85% of the country's wealth. Yeah, you heard that right, and that's generally not good for a country's stability and growth. But hey, let's keep it real. The US also has high inequality, and it's still one of the richest countries on the planet. So what makes South Africa's situation so unique? Strap in. Because today we're diving deep into the heart of South Africa's economic turmoil. From the sprawling shanty towns of Soweto to the gated opulence of Johannesburg suburbs, we'll uncover the stark contrast and systemic challenges that have left this nation teetering on the edge. We'll explore the legacy of apartheid, how decades of segregation and inequality set the stage for today's economic disparities. Corruption and mismanagement, the dark underbelly of political power that siphons hope from the masses. Crippling unemployment and poverty, the everyday reality for millions far removed from the affluent bubbles. Land reform controversies, the delicate balance between justice for the dispossessed and maintaining food security. And amidst all the chaos, there's a glimmer of hope, new leadership, grassroots movements, and international allies all fighting to piece together this shattered nation. Possibly some of this will be covered in the second part video. So if you're ready to see South Africa beyond the safari brochures and Instagram posts, hit that subscribe button and let's get started. This is the story of a nation's struggle and the unyielding spirit of its people. Welcome to South Africa. Welcome to the real story. South Africa's overall economy has been stagnating since 2010, with the GDP per capita falling during the same period. Hunger is on the rise, and while inflation remains relatively low, that's not surprising when unemployment is extremely high. The massive inequality does no justice to the situation either. Over half of South Africa's exports are raw minerals and ores materials extracted from the earth that require highly expensive equipment and low-skilled labor. This dependence on volatile ore prices can be a double-edged sword, often leading to high unemployment rates, much like their neighbor Botswana or regions like West Virginia and northern Canada. But here's where it gets even more startling. South Africa's youth unemployment rate is a staggering 66%. Yes, that's 2/3 of all young people out of work. This seems ridiculously high, even by mining standards. There must be another reason, right? And there definitely is. South Africa is a dual economy. On one side, you have a modern, developed infrastructure with gleaming skyscrapers and bustling business districts. On the other, you find sprawling townships and a population struggling to get by with limited access to basic services. These two worlds exist side by side, yet they couldn't be further apart in terms of opportunity and quality of life. It's basically two different countries in one. Sounds great, right? Double the product and double the money, baby. Except not quite. One of these economies is incredibly wealthy, monopolizing nearly all the mining operations, infrastructure, capital, and wealth. Half of this control lies in the hands of the government and its corrupt state-owned enterprises, while the other half is controlled by the urban rich, predominantly white population. The other half of South Africa, representing about 80% of the population, is much, much poorer. This majority struggles to access basic necessities like housing, water, electricity, education, and stable jobs. The stark contrast between these two realities is a testament to the deep-seated economic divide that continues to plague the nation. It's mainly made of black South Africans who earn on average 3 times less than white South Africans. So how did South Africa even get like this, and what is it doing to the Rainbow Nation?
The roots of inequality, a colonial legacy.
South Africa didn't develop as an independent entity, it was a colonial project. Initially colonized by the Dutch and later invaded by the British, the country's history is a tale of conquest and exploitation. The British, enticed by the discovery of diamonds and minerals, fought the Boer War to control these resources, while the native African populations like the Zulu and Xhosa watched as their land was claimed by foreign powers. The British and Boers, despite their power struggles, found common ground in one thing: keeping the native Africans from reclaiming their land. Cecil John Rhodes famously believed it was their God-given right. This led to the Native Lands Act of 1913, which allocated 92% of the land to European settlers, who made up only 1/5 of the population, effectively creating a pool of low-skilled, low-wage laborers. In 1936, the injustice was reinforced with another Land Act, slightly increasing the land for natives from 7.13% to 13.6%. This one-sided bullying set the stage for even more systemic oppression.
The rise of apartheid.
The real turning point came in 1948 with the rise of the Afrikaner National Party. Their president, Daniel F. Malan, introduced the policy of apartheid, meaning apartness in Afrikaans.
And I'm afraid that has been misunderstood so often. It could just as easily, and perhaps much better, be described as a policy of good neighborliness.
This policy institutionalized racial segregation and created a blueprint for the stark inequality we see today. Several draconian laws were enacted. 1. Population Registration Act. Everyone had to register by racial group white, colored, Indian, and Bantu. 2. Group Areas Act created separate living areas, cementing today's luxury gap. 3. Prohibition of Mixed Marriages Act and Separate Representation of Voters Act. No mixing, no shared political power. 4. Bantu Education Act established underfunded schools for Black South Africans, focusing on manual labor skills, and banned non-whites from universities. 5. Promotion of Bantu Self-Government Act recreated tribal states, further segregating and weakening the majority population. These laws effectively created two South Africas, one wealthy and white, and the other impoverished and black. This was a crazy racial time in general, banning the majority of South Africans from skilled jobs, education, owning property, public areas, and certain laws and securities the apartheid economy was based on, blocking entries so only the white South Africans benefited, and were dominating by using the white-owned police, government, military, and businesses.
The long road to freedom and its unfulfilled promises.
By the late 1970s, South Africa's economy began to crack under the weight of its own oppressive policies. High gold, diamond, and metal prices could only sustain so much. The 1960 Sharpeville massacre and the 1976 Soweto uprising were just precursors to the widespread unrest that would follow. International pressure grew, with the UN imposing an arms embargo and later in 1985, the US, UK, and unimposing economic sanctions. The government, facing a perfect storm of recession and international isolation, began to show more sympathy to the opposition, notably the African National Congress ANCs. In 1990, Nelson Mandela was freed and apartheid laws were repealed. By 1994, all South Africans were given the right to vote, leading to Nelson Mandela becoming the first black president. A new constitution and a new flag symbolized a fresh start. But the story doesn't end there. Ever since their first win in 1994, they've won every single election since, not just that they've won a majority government, and the majority of votes almost every single time, except for 2024, of course, in almost all provinces. For 30 years, South Africa has essentially been a one-party state, but have they got complacent because of that? HME have one major weakness, and it isn't just the opposition parties heckling them in the recent elections in parliament. Their weakness is corruption, or at least tolerating corruption. Despite early attempts to institute anti-corruption measures by Mandela, Mbeki, and then by Ramaphosa, it has always perpetuated itself in South Africa, especially within the ANC, so state-owned enterprises. Historically, these government-run companies used to consolidate the white minority's power and wealth, and they've been doing exact same thing for the ANC elite. But whether they're mining or infrastructure, there's usually a healthy amount of corruption in them, you know? Things like diverting the funds going to poor communities, water and electricity to their pockets, not properly maintaining their sites, firing well-trained technical leaders and replacing them with an incompetent family or tribal member. Most public and private companies are taking bribes and government officials stealing public funds meant to go to Nelson Mandela's funeral. Yes, I said his funeral. That's just disrespect. Then there's the face of corruption in South Africa. Jacob Zuma, president from 2009 to 2018, an inmate from 2021 to 22, charged with receiving bribes for an arms deal and accused of state looting, profiteering from the wealthy Gupta family, and 18 other counts of corruption. So now, massive inequality and a generally corrupt ruling party has led to a whole plethora of issues. Let's go through some, shall we? Electricity. South Africa, once praised for being the most industrialized country in Africa, is struggling to keep its lights on. I guess who owns the one electricity company they call Eskom in the country? Yeah, it's the ANC via their business front Chancellor House Holdings. It's hindered by corruption. Incompetent leaders not maintaining their plant and lack of investment into new power plants has led to power demand far surpassing power supply, and now they have to run the grid at 50% capacity. For the average South African, that usually means daily planned power outages or load shedding. As they say, it's not that bad, guys. It's usually around 2 hours a day. But in some areas like the KZN and some areas of Cape Town, they shut off the lights for 12 hours a day. I don't know how much mining or manufacturing or call centering or office computing you can do without electricity. So since their electricity per capita graph has stagnated since 2007, so has their product per capita, and South Africa gets 70% of its power from coal, one of the least efficient and dirtiest ways to get it. But investment into some renewables, foreign investment, and some cities privatizing show signs of hope in like a decade when these new plants can actually be made. Electricity isn't the only public works project failing. Everything else is .we, also got roads, rail, water, schools, hospitals, damn, even ports. I mean, their biggest export destination was Otambo Airport, not a much cheaper seaport. A certain civil engineering organization even gave them the lowest infrastructure rating ever recorded in 2022, with hospitals, schools, paved roads and water supplies at risk of failure, railways, unpaved roads and sanitation unfit for use. Whether it affects their ability to import and export goods they need, or having constant halt on their rail lines they just can't move their things about, and they can't move their water about either. About 25 to 30% of their entire water supply is lost from leaks in their pipes alone, not even including the droughts they constantly face sitting in a fairly arid region. Many households lack access to running water. They normally get their supply from a communal tap. Actually, only around 45% of houses do have a tap. The average dam is only filled up around 15% of the way, and poor planting once limited Cape Townians to only 50 FDL of water a day. Yes, Cape Town, the glamorous city, is a victim also, as they got close to their day zero the day they would run out of water. But then it was just a scary close call. We thank God for that.
The harsh reality of crime and segregation in South Africa.
Thanks to you if you're still watching. Now, we're zooming in on some pretty damning and heartbreaking stats about South Africa. In 2022-23, the country saw a staggering rise in crime. Kidnapping cases shot up by 41.7%, attempted murders increased by 13.7%, and carjackings rose by 8.5%. But it doesn't stop there. South Africa holds the dubious distinction of having the third highest crime rate in the world. It's in the top 10 for homicide rates, number 1 for burglary rates, and also tops the charts for rape. Cities like Pretoria, Durban, Johannesburg, and Cape Town are infamous for their high crime index.
The lingering scars of segregation.
Even though segregation officially ended over 30 years ago, many South African cities remain effectively segregated. After apartheid, a massive influx of Black South Africans moved to the cities. Lacking the resources to live in urban centers or suburbs, they were often forced to reside in the outskirts in areas commonly known as shanty towns. Take Khayelitsha in Cape Town, for example. These makeshift towns weren't built with proper infrastructure in mind. Many still lack basic access to water and electricity. During the apartheid era, businesses were often prohibited from setting up in predominantly Black areas, making poverty endemic. Consider Soweto, one of the more famous shanty towns. It covers only about 10% of Johannesburg's total area, but is home to nearly 40% of its population. Meanwhile, a virtual drive through the suburbs of Josie Reel's extravagant gated communities with beautiful courtyards. Yes, these two vastly different realities exist within the same city. And out in the countryside, things are much better.
A glimmer of hope.
The recent elections have sparked a bit of optimism in South Africa's political landscape. Amidst all these challenges, there's a renewed vigor to tackle the systemic issues that have plagued the country for decades. The ruling African National Congress, ANCS, despite facing significant criticism for corruption and inefficiency, has partnered with the Democratic Alliance DA. This partnership is seen as a sign of reform and a commitment to transparency. But let's hope they don't go full Julius Malema mode, seizing land from farmers and destroying the food supply. That could be catastrophic for the nation. While the journey towards a more equitable South Africa is fraught with challenges, recent developments in governance provide a glimmer of hope. If these initiatives are implemented effectively, they could pave the way for a brighter future where the disparity between the affluent suburbs and the struggling shanty towns is significantly reduced. The dream of a prosperous and inclusive South Africa remains alive, driven by the collective efforts of its people and their leaders. Stay tuned for more deep dives into pressing global issues. Until next time, take care.